Hello everyone and welcome to Facebook Live with me, Professor Michael Scott. It's a great pleasure to be with you and to have had all your fantastic questions coming in over the last couple of weeks, which I'm going to attempt to answer some of today. So, first off, apparently some people listen without sound, possibly because they're at work and they're not supposed to be on Facebook. So for this, we have the key topic here. I hope you can read this, it doesn't come out the wrong way around. This is what we're doing here today. And now we are going over to the first question. So we have a question from Alex Rook, and that question is, what do you think the theatre of Dionysus in Athens looked like in the 5th century BCE during the golden age of Greek theatre? Well, this was the time when the great playwrights Aeschylus, Euripides, Sophocles were writing and performing their plays in the theatre of Dionysus in Athens, and the Dionysia festival was an absolutely central part of the Athenian annual calendar, to the extent that all public business, the law courts for instance, shut down. Everything shut down. There was nothing else going on in ancient Athens during the time of the Dionysia bar the theatre. So there really was an emphasis that everyone in the city who should go to the theatre. There's even some indications that prisoners were let out of jail for the duration of the festival so that they too would not miss out on this great experience. And if you go to the theatre of Dionysus today, you see it beautifully in marble. Not just the seating, crumbling a little bit now, obviously, but obviously a hugely grand structure. And in addition to that, you see a great marble sculpted backdrop to the theatre, the sort of background, if you like, that also house the changing rooms and behind the scenes areas for the actors. But all of that is actually later than the 5th century. The marble seating really only gets going in from the 4th century BC onwards, and the nice grand carved sculpted background backstage bit is actually of the Roman era. In the 5th century BCE, when the great playwrights were putting on their plays, it was probably wooden seating. So we have to imagine these fantastic tragedies that have endured the test of time over 2,500 years being performed in a much less grand place than when we visit today. But that makes them no less important in the psyche, if you like, of the ancient Athenian state. So welcome once more, and nice to see some of you. Hello, thank you very much for your messages. And the hello from Crete, great to see you, Joe. I hope you can join us. It's been great to get questions from Crete, from Sweden, from Hungary, from Romania, from Australia, as well as from the UK. So great that you can join us. I'm Professor Michael Scott. I'm a professor in classics and ancient history at the University of Warwick, and I also present TV documentaries for the BBC. And this is our first Facebook Live question and answer. So we've done our first question from Alex Rook about the theatre of Dionysus in Athens. Hello, Deborah. Hello. How are you guys doing? And we're going to move on to one which seems to have really, well, put the cat amongst the pigeons. There's been a lot of questions about this, a lot of inquiries coming in, and it all relates to a photo that I posted on Instagram, which I'm going to try and pull up for you now. Here we are. Yes, this is the offending photo. It's me standing with a shield in a petrol station. Now, of all the questions that you could ask about this photo, the most important, it seems, is why have I not got any shoes on? Yes, here it is, right there. We can even zoom in to see the offending piece. No, I do not have any shoes on. And the reasoning behind this is, well, this comes from when we were filming a series called Who Were the Greeks? Hello, Jackie. Hello, Anne-Marie. How are you doing? We were filming a series called Who Were the Greeks back in 2012 or 2013. And we were filming a couple of days with some modern day reenactors. Now, these guys were Athenian taxi drivers who, on their weekends, they headed off into the forest outside of Athens, and they dressed up as Spartan and Athenian, ancient Spartan and ancient Athenian soldiers with their shields and their swords and their helmets, and they headed around the woods all weekend play fighting. So we were filming and joined them, and then afterwards we got a lift back with one of them in a taxi back to central Athens, and that was his shield that he kept in the boot of his taxi during the week. God knows what people thought if they put their luggage in the boot when they were just getting a taxi ride from the airport into the city centre or something. Then hello Paul, hello Jackie, how are you guys doing? Hello Florence, bonjour, ça va? Kalimera, Natalie, Kalimera or Kalispera. No, Kalispera, Kalimera. We're just on the edge, somewhere between the two. Anyway, we pulled over at a gas station because he needed petrol, and at this point I was having, to be frank, a snooze in between filming sessions, and I'd taken off my shoes because it had been quite a long day, and I was curled up in the back of the car asleep, and jumped out to stretch my legs and could not resist grabbing the shield out of the boot of the taxi and posing for the photo. Who doesn't want to hold an ancient Greek shield? Sadly, he didn't have the helmet as well. There it was. I would have put that on as well. Hello, James. How are you doing? That is why I don't have any shoes on. Completely forgot to put them back on. So I would make a rubbish ancient Greek warrior going to war without his shoes. It's not really cutting the mustard. Okay, we've got another question about behind-the-scenes realities of filming here. Just exactly how many black linen shirts and cream chinos do you take in your suitcase when you're filming? Right, well, okay. Yes, this is because very often you can see me when I'm doing my documentaries wearing a black linen shirt and chinos. This was because when I first started filming my first documentary back in 2010, which was Delphi, Belly Button of the Ancient World for BBC 4, they told me that editors, the director told me that editors of the film really preferred if you could be wearing the same thing all the way through the programme, because you always shoot a film out of sequence. So in the morning we may be doing a scene from the beginning of the film, then straight afterwards something even from the end of the film, and then after that something in the middle of the film, because you shoot by location. So whatever location you go to, you then do all the sequences that you need to do for the whole film in that one location, and then you move on to the next location. So the problem is that if you wear a different thing each day, you may then end up, when the film comes to be edited into sequence of the film, you may then be wearing something in one shot, and then suddenly you appear in the next shot of the film and you're wearing something totally different. Now, while that kind of Superman change of clothes is sometimes you can get away with it, oftentimes you can't. So the simplest solution, I was told, was just to wear the same thing all the time. But do not panic, as some people have suggested that I must, by the end of filming, be smelling to high heaven if I'm never changing my clothes. I do have many black linen shirts, some of which have been with me since that first programme in 2010 and are still going strong, and quite a few pairs of the cream trousers, field trousers as well. So yeah, so I keep a little wardrobe to one side of stuff that gets chucked out in the field, and frankly, it still, even though I have several pairs of all of it, it still all comes back smelling and needing a good clean afterwards. Hi Susie, hi Deborah, how are you guys doing? Thank you very much for your questions. So just to recap, I'm Professor Michael Scott. I'm the Professor of Classics at the University of Warwick and presenter of TV documentaries, and this is our first live Facebook Q&A where I'm answering some of the questions that you've very kindly sent in. Thank you very much indeed for them, and it's been a joy to receive them and now to have a chance to respond. We've got a more serious question here from Christina Evans, which is if history only remembered one Greek or Roman, who should it be and why? That is a really tough question. Why should we remember anyone? Is it because they did something, they're the kind of person that we should admire? Or is it because they did something which had a massive influence or impact on the ancient world, or indeed on our modern world? I'm in my choice, I'm probably going to go for the latter aspect. I'm going to go for the Greek playwright Euripides. Now, this was a guy who might not want to admire as an individual. In fact, in ancient Athens, he was often thought to be quite an annoying character. He said, other playwrights have portrayed people as they should be, but I portray people as they really are, kind of thing. I think he was probably pretty full of himself, and he was thought of as the enfant terrible of the Athenian state at the time, where previous playwrights, Aeschylus, he'd fought the Battle of Marathon. Sophocles, he was an official advisor and general to the city. They all took on serious civic roles. Euripides was the sort of guy who really shirked a little bit of that and concentrated on his playwright and was the artiste with a capital A. And yet, his plays, I think, are something extraordinary. I remember reading Euripides' Medea as one of the texts when I was 16, 17. I was studying ancient Greek, and it really has stayed with me to this day. He wrote tragedies which talk about universal human values that haven't changed over the last 2,500 years: love, justice, revenge, horror, freedom. And he put them into often very kind of recognisable situations. Medea was a kind of a couple, a husband and wife, fighting over the issues of their children, or who was right and who was wrong. Hello, Laura. Who was right and who was wrong as trouble beset their marriage. And yet that play, the power of that play is still fresh 2,500 years later. So Euripides would be my guy if one ancient Greek or Roman should be remembered. And although I'm sure many of you would have many others that we could pick from, and if you've got your favourite Greek or Roman, or the person you think who should be most remembered, then please do shout out now. Oh no, Laura, anyone else got the black screen of death? Hang on a sec, let's see if we can do something about this. It doesn't seem fresh from my perspective, so I'm hoping that it's still as fresh with you guys. I hope you can hear me as well. Let me know if you can't for any reason. Medea, Shane, I'm glad you agree with my choice. Thank you very much indeed. Anyone else with Greeks or Romans that they want to show off about and sort of put in the balloon, if you like, to survive the cull of, please let me know. We'll move on though to another question. So we've had, this one is from Becky McCollum, and this one is on behalf of her daughter, who's aged 11, who's really excited about the Greeks and Romans at the moment, and that's fantastic to see. Great to see the young people kind of still loving Greeks and Romans. We have a 2.5-year-old daughter, and we use the British Museum ducks, the ancient Egyptian duck, the ancient Greek duck, and the ancient Roman duck in the bath with our daughter in the evenings, trying to get her interested and excited in the ancient Greeks, Romans and Egyptians even at that young age. I do a pretty good impression of each individual culture by the way that the ducks move through the bath. Maybe we'll share a video of it one day. Hello Becky, hello. We are watching, great that you can think. Will you be doing any more public lectures at Warwick? Asked Catherine McLuth via the Facebook Live. Yes, we're hoping to. I'm back at Warwick. I've been on research leave this year from Warwick on a Leave Hume Research Fellowship during 2017-18. So I haven't been teaching at Warwick, but I'm back at Warwick full-time in 2018-19 as the Director of Undergraduate Studies and Senior Tutor in the department, but also will be teaching there, running a whole new module about ancient global history, which I'm really excited to be running. It's going to be the first time that ancient global history has ever been taught at undergraduate level at any UK university. So it's going to be a hugely fun challenge, which I'm looking forward to getting going with the students. And there'll be some public lectures as well as also in January, I'll be going up to the Lytham St Anne's Classical Association branch, which I'm president on, which is the largest branch of the Classical Association in the country, and I'll be giving my presidential lecture there on the 10th of January in 2019. You can find all the information for all my upcoming public lectures via my website, which is www.michaelscottweb.com, and if you look for the events page there, you'll be able to see everything that's coming up. You can also follow what I'm up to through the Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Michael Scott Academic, and of course there's Twitter at Prof MC Scott, and Instagram as well now at Prof MC Scott as well. So it's great that you could join us. My name is Michael Scott. I am a professor in classics and ancient history at the University of Warwick, and this is our first little Facebook Live Q&A. It's great to see you guys here. Archilochus, one of you, and Cato. Those are your Greeks, or Romans that you would rather that history would be remembering. Archilochus for one of his blunt and powerful poetry, says Deborah. Great idea, great option. Cato, I don't know, a bit sour, a bit dour, wouldn't exactly raise the spirits spirits, I think, very much. But then you're quite right that Euripides and his tragedies might not be making us laugh from the rooftops very often either. Mama Prada has asked, do you think classical civilization studies still have a place in our education system? Absolutely, I do. And I do a lot of work with national charity Classics for All. We have just launched a brand new group called the Warwick Classics Network at Warwick that I lead, whose fundamental role is to help ensure that classical civilization and ancient history has a future in every school across the country and is an option for every student. I think fundamentally that learning about these wonderful, wacky, weird and incredibly important periods of our human story, that of the Greeks and the Romans, is a really important part of our education and is really fun too. And so I think absolutely it should continue to be a thriving part of how we educate our children. Sarah, wow, that's a very, very kind invitation to be president of our Cretan Society. I love coming to Crete, absolutely love it. It would be great to spend some more time with you guys, and let's talk every month. Do get in touch and we can discuss what we do. It's Sappho. Oh, okay, yes, Sappho is your Greek or Roman that you would want to be remembered above all. Okay, Sappho. Well, the poetry is extraordinary. The mystery behind the person perhaps even more extraordinary. So we've got Sappho, we've got Cato, we've got Archilochus, and we've got Euripides. My God, you guys are a sophisticated bunch. No one's mentioned Hercules. Disney's Hercules was one of my kind of favourite movies growing up. And although when you get into all the myths surrounding the guy, he's not quite as squeaky clean as the Disney's version made out, I still think he's another character that we might want to remember. Okay, Hannibal, a hero or a villain in my opinion. My God, the questions are coming in from Neil Armstrong now. Hannibal, well, I mean, this is a character. Crucially, it's almost impossible to know anything about Hannibal because most of our sources about him come from the Romans, the enemy. And so when we're talking about Hannibal, we're almost always talking about him through the filter of the people who saw him as one of the greatest threats to the survival of Rome. But what the Roman sources do also offer is a caricature of a man who was a worthy adversary. He was a man who almost brought Rome to its knees, and as such he had to be, even in Roman eyes, a worthy opponent. So you get the impression of someone incredibly canny, incredibly driven, incredibly determined. I think he gave Rome a very good run for its money, and Rome, if you like, learnt from its experiences with Hannibal. It reformed, it improved itself, and probably Hannibal was partly responsible for turning Rome into the more efficient, more ruthless, more successful military machine that it went on to become. Advice for getting kids interested in the classics, asked question from Jason Toti. Both kids loved it when you went to Syracuse. Oh, I'm so glad Syracuse is such a fantastic place. Oh, Sicily more generally. It's a place where they have ice cream for breakfast. Why would you not love such a country? So advice for getting kids interested, it depends a little bit on their age. Obviously, I was saying that with my 2.5-year-old, we're doing it with British Museum, Egyptian, Ancient Greek and Roman ducks. With a little bit older, I'm actually in the processes of writing a book that will be for 8 to 11-year-olds, talking about life in ancient Greece, that will be coming out hopefully in the next year or so to accompany some of the material that's taught in the early key stage categories of the curriculum. And after that, I think it's a question of, you could use the great Disney films like Disney's Hercules, you could use Percy Jackson books or the films if they're getting into that. I think for me, the real turning point though, as you probably realised, Jason, when you took your kids to Syracuse, was actually getting to the locations and the sites themselves. And I, growing up, I have to admit, I absolutely hated Latin. A lot of you asked this question, actually, so we're kind of getting back to questions that were asked in advance about what got me interested in classics. And I have to admit that when I was a kid, I really didn't like Latin. I gave it up, actually, as soon as I possibly could. I didn't like the way it was taught, I didn't find it interesting, I didn't find it connected with me. And yet on the side, I was lucky enough to be introduced to a few characters of the ancient Greek alphabet, and something about that, the mystery of the different alphabet, the language, really hooked. But I had no intention of going on to study classics. I was always going to be something sensible like a lawyer. And hello, Diva, how are you guys doing? Yeah, absolutely, Becky. The Percy Jackson books, I think, for kids and adults are brilliant. You know, they take Greek myths and they beautifully bring them up to date for the modern world. One of the best scenes, I thought, in Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief was when Percy Jackson has to fight against Medusa. You can't look in her eyes without turning to stone, the one with all the snakes for hair. But instead of sort of looking through the reflection of his shield, as in the ancient myths, they used the shiny back of a brand new iPod to make sure that they were only looking at the reflections of Medusa. So I thought it was a brilliant way in which you could update ancient myths for modern times. But what got me interested in classics, well, as I was saying, I got introduced to some ancient Greek, absolutely loved it, but had no intention of becoming a classicist. So I was going to be a lawyer or something sensible, so I thought I'll just keep this on the side as a bit of fun. And then when I was 17, I actually had my 17th birthday in Olympia, in the ancient site of Olympia, while we were on a week-long tour to Greece. It wasn't a tour that started particularly well. The airline lost my luggage on the way out and it never appeared. So I did spend that week going around Greece in the same pair of trousers and a couple of Greek t-shirts that I bought from the local supermarket. But being in the sites, being amongst the ruins, walking in the footsteps where the ancient Greeks walked, something about that really clicked for me. And as a result, I decided that I wanted to go and read classics at university. And then when thinking about what to do for a job, well, I mean, I had spent some years absolutely just loving spending time immersed in the ancient world and in visiting Rome and all around Italy and indeed Greece. But what really made the difference for me was spending a summer doing a summer course at the British Archaeological School in Rome, where for 3 weeks we got to really engage with the key monuments and sites around the city. And after I came back from that, there was no question. So being in the sites, being in locations, if you can get your kids out to Greece or to Italy and just have a rummage around and some of the stuff, I think that is one of the great ways to get kids interested. Not all lawyers are sensible. Yes. I think, James, you're quite right. I can probably think of a few that aren't that sensible as well. But at least it sounds like a sensible career when you're a 15-year-old. Could we, you also check out the BBC primary resources. Deborah, great idea. Yeah, the BBC has some great primary school resources as well about ancient Greece and Rome as well that you can check out. And hopefully we're going to be sharing lots more resources. So in a couple of weeks, the Warwick Classics Network website should go live as well, which will be warwick.ac.uk/classics/WCN. And we're going to have lots of videos linked to the drama plays that we put on every year and also other kinds of resources that you can partake of. So there's tons out there. It's just a question, I guess, of accessing it as much as possible. And it would be remiss of me not to also mention Horrible Histories, kind of horrible, The Groovy Greeks was a book that kind of absolutely hooked me when I was a kid. And hi, Mihai, how are you? Very nice to see you. So we'll go back to the questions of Becky, on behalf of her daughter, Becky McCann. Which is your favourite Greek god and why? Good question. Okay, why is your favourite Greek god? Well, for me, it has to be Apollo. Now, Apollo is the daughter of Zeus, king of the gods, and Leto, and he has a twin sister, Artemis, and Leto was looking for somewhere to give birth to Apollo and Artemis, and the island of Delos, which is a beautiful island in the middle of the Greek Cyclades, offered her safe home to give birth, and so Apollo and Artemis were born. Now, Apollo is a complicated god because on the one hand, he's the god of music. Hermes gave him the gift of the lyre. He's the god of good health, of medicine, Hebrew, of sunlight. He's the god of oracles and prophecy, all these good things. And yet at the same time, if you get on the wrong side of Apollo, he is the god of plague. He is the god of illness. He is the god that can bring vengeance showering down upon you. When you think of the Iliad and the plagues that he brings, Apollo is a god that really is a Jekyll and Hyde character, and I absolutely love that about him. He's one that every Greek that you read about in literature is constantly on edge with, as to making sure that they're keeping on the right side of Apollo. You don't ever want to get on the wrong side of Apollo. And another question from Becky McComb's daughter, which is your favourite museum to visit and why? Now, this is a really tough question. Museums, it's great spending time in museums. I don't know if you're like me, I like to do museums quickly. I want to be in and out, maximum of an hour, and then go back if necessary another time to see some more. Even with my love of the ancient world, I'm not necessarily someone that can spend hours looking at every single piece in a single sitting. But one of the museums that always captures my attention is in Vergina in northern Greece. And this is the museum where you can visit the tombs and some of the stuff that they found in the tombs of Macedon, and particularly probably the burial place of Philip, the father of Alexander the Great. Now, what's so special about this museum is that the tombs originally were constructed, beautiful tombs, they were painted, lots of lovely stuff was put inside, but then over the top of them was piled a massive, what's called a tumulus of earth. And so what you ended up in the landscape was just this enormous sort of almost man-made hill. Now, to excavate them and to find out what was there, obviously they had to remove all that earth and remove that hill to uncover the tombs. But what they've done at Vergina, hello Tony, how are you doing? What they've done in Vergina is to then afterwards put back the covering so that you go underground, you go into the tumulus, into the darkness to visit the museum, and then with an incredibly theatrical display of lighting, you come up upon the facades of the tombs of these dead Macedonian kings, and you gaze in wonder at the extraordinary gold and silver and other precious stones of the armour and the jewellery and the furniture that was buried with them, that they put in a series of display cabinets. And I challenge anyone not to go to that museum and to walk into that space and not feel awed by the majesty of it. When you go there, however many tourists are in there, everyone falls silent and just gazes in wonder at the facades of the tombs. Hello Philip, how are you doing? So that is my kind of favourite museum. Every time I go there, I just love to spend some time there. So much to be uncovered in Greece. I completely agree, Tony. I mean, the archaeology has been going strong for well over 150 years, digging up, and there's still so much more to discover. Also because our questions keep changing that we're asking about the past, but also our technology keeps improving. So we are able to discover more and more and more with the scientific methods that we can now apply. So we're getting to be able to answer, or indeed even ask questions that we just weren't able to ask before, because the technology wasn't there to help us provide the answers. So going on with a couple more questions, we've got about another 5 minutes, and if we don't get to your questions this time, then we'll definitely get to them next time, I promise. What have we got here? From Latifa Walker, a question. Hi Michael, if you were to write a screenplay which was to be made into a feature film, what important event or person in the classical world would you choose to make a film about, and why? Great question. So for me, it would have to be Megasthenes. Now, you may not have heard of Megasthenes, but this was a man who, in the late 4th century BC, so after the era of Alexander the Great, he was an ambassador. He was an ambassador to the court of the Seleucids, which was one of the kingdoms which grew up within the empire of Alexander the Great. After he died, his empire was split up amongst his major generals, and one of those empires was the Seleucid Empire. And Megasthenes was one of the ambassadors of the Seleucid Empire who was sent all the way to the court of King Chandragupta in India, in the capital city of the Mauryan Empire, Pataliputra. And Megasthenes then is a Greek sitting in the court of an Indian king, and he's writing his account of what he thinks of Indian society and how it compares and contrasts and differs with ancient Greece. And what he's telling us is some amazing things, not just about Indian way of life and how that differs or is the same as the Greek way of life, but he's talking also about magical mythical creatures, giant ants that dig for gold and will fight men to the death if they try and steal that gold away from them. He tells us about men who have their feet on backwards, men that have no noses and so have to breathe through their mouths, men that have no mouths and have to eat just by smelling the scent of food through their noses. And he also talks about all the other ambassadors who are at the court of King Chandragupta Maurya at Pataliputra, coming from all other different societies in the ancient Greek world. And so I would want to make a feature film and write a screenplay about that, about a Greek living at the edge of the known world to the Greeks, but as a result coming into contact with people from lots of other ancient societies, and the wonder and mystery that must have been kind of in his head, but also just kind of mixing with all those different cultures in that court, and trying to reassess your place in the world when suddenly you realise that the world is a lot bigger than even you thought it could be. So thank you very much for that question, Stephen. That was absolutely excellent. What about one from Susie Howard? Do you think there is anything that the ancients did better in their day than we do in the modern world? Tough question. Well, obviously from technological aspects, we are vastly advanced. In some ways, obviously, we're causing our own problems now with technology that they didn't have back in the ancient Greek world. But I mean, I think the thing about the ancient Greeks, which I think they did very well, and they did it to themselves, and they also do it to us today. Every time we study them, I think they have the same impact, and that is to really make the ground insecure beneath our feet. One of the things I think we find sort of least attractive or palatable about the ancient Greek world is the way that it constantly challenged its own citizens as to whether they knew or understood or thought exactly what they did. Now, the most famous example of that is the philosopher Socrates, who kept challenging people, and expressions like great philosophers know that they don't know very much. Okay, Phil, have eventually managed to join. Instructions need to be improved. Okay, we will do. We'll do some more instructions on the Facebook page. Thank you very much for letting us know. Great that you guys can all join us, and happy to be with you for a Q&A, Facebook Live Q&A. We're going to be doing this every Thursday at 4 p.m. UK time. So if your questions didn't get answered this time, either that you sent in advance or that you're posing on the screen, do send them in via the Facebook page, facebook.com/Michael Scott Academic, as a message, and they will get passed on to me, and then I'll do my best to answer them. So thank you very much for joining us. You can also get in touch with me via Twitter at ProfMCScott or Instagram at ProfMCScott as well. Before we go, I must give you one new announcement, which is that my new TV series for the BBC, Ancient Invisible Cities, is now confirmed to be coming on screens in the UK very shortly. And again, just in case you've been doing all this without the sound on, although it might have been quite a boring half hour if you had, we have a page for you here. Ancient Invisible Cities, Cairo, Athens, Istanbul, BBC Two, will be going live on Friday the 7th of September at 9 p.m. on BBC Two. You heard it here first. This is the first live announcement of the new series, TX times and dates, and I will be live tweeting alongside the series, so I will be posting additional information. I'll be showing you behind the scenes photos, and I'll be answering your questions, so do tweet them in either to me at ProfMCScott or using the hashtag InvisibleCitiesBBC. It's been absolutely fantastic to spend the time with you. Our half hour is up. I won't detain you any longer on a beautiful sunny Thursday afternoon. Get outside and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you for taking the time with us today. It's been a pleasure to be with you, and I look forward to seeing you again next Thursday. Have a great week.